I'm Ernie Humphrey, Educational Programs Leader for Proformative, the largest online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, FP&A, the transforming journey from Vanity to Actionable Metrics. Today, we will hear how to guide your FP&A organization away from data collection and compilation to providing analytics to drive decisions from subject matter expert James Myers of FP&A Strategy Consulting. And we will also hear from Richard A. Pacheco, Vice President of Finance and Administration with AAA Southern New England, who will share his experiences in navigating this journey successfully for AAA and specific advice to help you in guiding your own company's journey with GPS-like precision. I would like to thank Profix, whose commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible and delivered at no cost. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we will have a presentation from our featured speakers, James and Richard, and then we'll move to our interactive Q&A session, where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we will do our best, and we'll follow up afterwards on any questions we did not get to. A few more logistical notes about the webinar. A link to today's presentation and video recording will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. And please note the presentation is already posted at www.performative.com/resources for free download. Those who would like CPE credits will need to answer all polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credit. For any questions on CPE, please send an email to cpe@performative.com. Again, we encourage you to ask questions on today's topic via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time during the webinar. Finally, you will be asked to take a short survey today regarding the webinar immediately following the conclusion of the webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding our event today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. A quick word about Proformative. Proformative is the largest online community and resource for senior-level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related leaders. Proformative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice and insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges that they face every day. Okay, let's get started by introducing today's first speaker, James Myers, Global Financial Executive and Consultant, FP&A Strategy Consulting, LLC. James has over 15 years of finance and sales operations experience at high-tech and telecom leaders Dell and Nokia. He has lived and worked in the U.S., Europe, and MEA, and has held the positions of Finance Director North America at Nokia and Director Sales Operations Global Online at Nokia. Most recently, James has been consulting at FP&A Strategy Consulting, LLC, based in Palo Alto, California, where he has successfully implemented processes and procedures focused on growing shareholder value. James is a certified chartered accountant and earns his Bachelor of Accounting and Bachelor of Commerce degrees from the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to our first speaker, James. James, go ahead and take it away for us.
Thanks, Ernie, and thanks for that introduction. And thanks very much to Proformative and Profix for inviting me to share my thoughts today. And thanks very much for everybody joining. Firstly, I'd like to start with the title of our webinar today, The Transforming Journey from Vanity to Actionable Metrics. I see this on two levels. Firstly, the journey and evolution that the finance function is going through at the moment. And secondly, my own journey of trying to discover the true value behind the FP&A function. I hope to touch on both of these during this webinar. First, my vision. In the future, corporations of all sizes will become more dependent on FP&A teams for direction, both in short-term tactical business decisions to long-term strategic initiatives. Analytics will play a greater role, offering support during uncertain times. This reminds me a lot of the evolution of the GPS, and Ernie, I heard you mention the GPS in your introduction. But 15 years ago, getting lost was part of our journey. Now we have a little box inside the car that guides us through uncharted territories and finds the fastest route between 2 points. But not only can it process and analyze historic data, the map data, but it is able to take into account traffic conditions and reroute us to give us the shortest route. Nowadays, the more modern versions also have algorithms that predict data conditions and take action. I see this as the FP&A function of the future, the way that we will be guiding corporations through these uncertain times. It seems that I'm not the only person that thinks along these lines and sees that there needs to be an evolution. In the CFO Journal, in the Wall Street Journal in April 2013, Deloitte wrote an article on overhauling the financial operating model for more effective FP&A function. They talk about FP&A being more of a strategic partner and touched on ways of doing this. I hope in this webinar to give you a few more details. Some of the things that were mentioned, finance moving beyond traditional roles, taking on a more strategic activities, supporting decision-making around new markets, new products, and M&A activities. Not only painting a clear picture of what has happened, but also predicting the future in a more dynamic way. So that is the challenge to us in the finance community. But first, let's go through some of the data that supports this. There's still high levels of uncertainty in the market, and they forecast to continue in the future. If we have a look at the charts here, in 2009, there's significant change. Organizations were reporting 81% were reporting significant change. This is after the 2008, so that was expected. But as we go into 2012 and beyond, we can still see that there's, corporations are still expecting significant amounts of change. For the FP&A community, I think this is a good thing. It demonstrates that, continued change means that there's still an opportunity for us to really understand what is going on in the business and support the business. And that's where I see our role. Not only is there a lot of change, but also there's an increasing pressure on CEOs. CEOs are expected to generate more revenue, and they're expected to reduce costs. Companies are also seeing that their organizations need to change. Only 5% of the companies polled in this example here see that they don't need any change to achieve their goals. And we can see going up from there, 14% think that there's over 30% of change that is needed. Decisions executives struggle with the most can be categorized probably in the biggest two are the first two there, organic growth and business strategy. Organic growth in this example is defined as R&D funding, geographic expansion, product and service expansion, and business strategy is what to provide to whom and on what competitive basis. Both of these two categories fall squarely within the FP&A job description. So our support is critical to help support CEOs in their decision-making process. And lastly, I just do a quick slide on data. 15 years ago, the infrastructure that was set up for the GPS was very basic. Now satellites are in place and GPS works seamlessly. The same is with data. Before the cloud, data was hard to find. Nowadays, there's more data than we know what to humanly handle. The point of the slide is also to illustrate the growth in data. I mean, these are just a few points to kind of take into consideration. Global IP traffic is growing at 23% until 2017. Mobile traffic growing at 66%. Digital storage growing from 320 exabytes to 4.1 zettabytes. And before doing the research on this, I didn't even know what a zettabyte was. So you can see that there's an incredible growth in the amount of volume that's available for us. So where do we go from here? You'll see the man in the slide has no GPS, his mistake. So at this point, I would like to pause and talk about my personal journey. I started my career in practice, auditing and accounting, where if I had the ability to write a book, I probably would have written a book about how not to run a company. Coming into business as an auditor or an accountant, you always see things that people shouldn't be doing. So I decided on a career change. I decided that it was time to get into industry. So I joined large corporates, Dell and Nokia, where I could have, if I had had the ability, I would have written a book on how to run a company. Probably wouldn't have sold many copies because neither of those companies have done very well in the long run. So after 15 years, I decided I was ready for a new career change. This time, I wanted to learn how to run a company well. So I decided to try a few startup ideas and started FP&A consulting to see what I could learn. The one thing that has had a major impact on my thinking over the last year is a book by Eric Ries called The Lean Startup. There are many pearls of wisdom in this book, and all the way from startups and even applicable to large corporates. But the concept that I wanted to talk about, and actually is a very small part of the book, is a concept that he talks about called validated learning. So this is just a quick extract from Wikipedia on the Lean Startup. The book is focused on getting a minimum viable product into the marketplace as quickly as possible, and then testing various iterations and experiments until you reach a point where you either pivot or persevere. But what I'd like to really focus on is the measurement part of it, that he calls validated learning. The definition of validated learning is the process in which one learns by trying out an initial idea and then measuring it. Each test of an idea is a single iteration in a larger process of many iterations whereby something is learned and the lessons apply to the succeeding test. So effectively, it's a process, and it's a continuous process where you experiment, you take your learnings, you make that at the foundation, you then re-experiment, you take those and build the foundation bigger and bigger and bigger. The idea is that you continue to build on top of everything. This is very easy to apply, or sometimes typically applied in web or software analytics. But as it says, and this is an extract from Wikipedia, this can be applied to anything. And what I've tried to do in the last year in my consulting is try to apply this to real business situations. And I hope to give you a real-life example in a minute. The typical steps, and this is just very summarized, is you specify your goal, specify the metric, decide on what actions you're going to take, analyze the metric, and then improve and try again. So it's a continuous cycle. A few of the definitions that we need to get our heads around. Actionable metrics. The metrics can lead to an informed business decision and subsequent action, versus the opposite of an actionable metric is a vanity metric. Measures that give the rosiest picture possible, but do not accurately reflect the key drivers of business. The best way I've always found to describe the difference between these two is normally when you're in a meeting and you see a metric or a graph that's up on the board, and you see that it's trending in an upward direction. Normally what would happen is the sales team would say, well, that's because we're selling a lot. Marketing would say that's because there's a brand initiative ongoing and that's driving that increase in sales. Operation would go, we have a seamless supply chain, etc. However, when the metric turns the other way around and starts going down, then suddenly everybody's, no, that's not our problem. Marketing, sales would go, marketing hasn't provided us the marketing backup to support our product, and say, the marketing team would be blaming somebody else. So a vanity metric is there's too many things impacting the metric to be able to make any business sense out of it. So what we're trying to look at is trying to explore these actionable metrics. Further definitions just on the principles of reporting. Eric Ries covered 3 of these. The last 3 I decided to also include accuracy, because I feel that that's probably one that is pretty critical, especially in our business, and also completeness. So the four A's of reporting principle: accurate, be free from error and omissions, and complete set of data; accessible, easily understood and available widely; auditable, be able to go back to the source data; and actionable, determine a clear cause and effect relationship so that you can define actions in response to it. So just a very quick case study. This is something that I worked on, and it's a smaller part of a bigger project that I worked on, but I find it a good way of demonstrating exactly the difference between a actionable and a vanity metric. So this company, that's a made-up company, Farming, has a new VP of sales, and he's looking to kick off his weekly call. He has 5 regional sales directors. In the last company he worked at, he had the prior week sales by region, and he used to set his weekly sales objective based on the previous week's sales. His goal is to grow market share and ultimately sales. The company, Farming, sells organic products to high-end retailers. 80% of the sales are bought by one retail chain. So if we take the model that we just gone through in the previous slides, so firstly, let's specify the goal. The goal in this case is very simple, to grow market share and ultimately sales. We specify the metric, so the metric weekly market share mix, so that's relatively straightforward. Act to achieve this goal. So what our sales director or sales VP is going to do every week is they're going to set up a set of experiments. They might be specific promotions or actions that will happen on a store level, and they will measure the impact of these and the impact on the market share, and analyze the metric. So what we're going to do is measure how effective those metrics are and what impact that is having on the overall market share. Then what we'll do is, once we've got the data from those metrics, what we'll do is then we'll measure and see which metrics are effective. Maybe we'll expand those metrics to other regions, or maybe we will build on top of that metric, and that action, and then build another action on top of that, and measure again and see what sort of impact we get out of that. So here's what we developed for them. This is one of the 4 charts that we ended up creating for this company, and which were aligned to their strategic intent. This is a market share percentage on the left-hand side, and the weeks going down the bottom. So we start on week 42 going up to week 1, which is the first week of the year. And on the left-hand side, you can see fruit, for example, is the blue line at the top, and it's trending in a nice upward position, so we're gaining market share. This is your typical vanity metric that you would see in a lot of companies. We don't really know, the actions that we're taking, are they affecting the market share, or is there something changing in our competition? We can see in week 53 there was a huge decrease in our market share when we look at stemmed vegetables and we look at root vegetables, and we see this massive decline, which then suddenly bounces back in week 1. We're not sure if that's because of competition, whether we did a bad job at selling, our products were out of stock. So there's a whole lot of implications that could in fact affect that. So what we decided to do is we decided to explode or drill down on a week to get more granular. So this is a bit of a crazy chart, but what I'll do is try and explain it in a more high level. We now go down the level of data, and this is the current week by store. So each of the stores is listed, and from the left to the right, we have the stores with the biggest opportunity to the stores with the smallest opportunity. So Lincoln Park on the left-hand side, you can see, and the second is Regency, going all the way down to West Des Moines on the right-hand side, which gives us a perspective on which are the stores that we should be focusing on and which are the stores that are the least focused. We also selected only 4 of the product lines. These 4 lines only make up 80%. So we selected fruit, which, if you remember from the last slide, was 14% market share, stem vegetables, root vegetables, and fruit vegetables. So in each of these 4, then we can see this graph measures which products are above the average market share and which products are below, or product lines are below the average market share. So let's take Lincoln Park, for example, on the far left-hand side. The market share for fruit is above, the blue line is above be 0, and it's about 2%. So that means that fruit is 2%. So the average was about 14%, so we're looking at about 16% market share. Whereas we can see that stem vegetables are below the average market share. Root vegetables and fruit vegetables, again, are above. If we look at the Regency store, which is the store following, and you'll see that the blue line is about -3%. So instead of it being 14% market share, it's below the line. Well, it's below -3%, so it'll give you about 11%. So you can go through all of the rest of them. But when the VP sits down and tries to make decisions, what he does is he then sits down and focuses on where he wants to have the biggest impact. So he wants some of the ideas and some of the examples of what happened in this example is that in the Lincoln store, the focus was on stem vegetables. Let's get stem vegetables up to above the 0 point so that it's higher than the average market share. And one of the decisions or actions that he had taken to do that is aisle training. So he's decided that aisle training, so he'll send his retail rep out to Lincoln store to go and do aisle training. Regency was the next one. Notice that fruit was below. He's decided that the idea behind that one would be to do some in-store couponing or even doing a demo giveaway of fruit, so to try and drive that up. So what he'll do is send a retail rep out to that store to go and drive that up. What we'll do is we'll then take this exact chart the following week, and we'll see if we're able to drive from that -1.8% in Lincoln Park on stem vegetables, if we're able to drive that up. If we are able to drive that up, then maybe we would continue with that and maybe look at other areas that we see below average scores in stem vegetable. If it had no or little impact, maybe we would try doing it again, but just doing something slightly different. Maybe instead of spending half an hour on aisle training, maybe spending an hour on aisle training, just to see if we can get that metric to change. So that's kind of the idea behind actionable metrics. So actionable metrics are more designed at specific goals. So they don't necessarily measure the big picture, and that's one of the big differences between actionable and vanity metrics. But what they're really designed to do is actually measure the outcome. So notice in this example as well, the impact of competition is taken away because we're looking at our average market share. One of the other questions that the VP also asked me was, what is the ideal shape that you would like to see this graph look like? And the answer is, well, whatever actions you would like to drive. So, for example, that he wanted to focus on the top 5 stores. He wanted to make sure that the top 5 stores were above average market share on all the key product lines. So that's what the shape of the graph should then look like. So there's no typical shape. It's all depending on what sort of actions you want to drive. So I hope that's given you a small example in trying to differentiate between actionable and vanity metrics. But just to summarize, and there's high levels of uncertainty, and that uncertainty is expected to continue. There's an increasing pressure on CEOs to grow revenue while reducing costs. More data is being created, and that we can truly make sense of. CFOs have cited difficulties in business strategy and organic decision making, and FP&A need to move beyond traditional roles and take a more strategic activity. So I see some of the things to add to the FP&A toolbox are definitely the concept of validated learning, the concept of setting goals, specifying metrics, acting, measuring, taking action, and then resetting, and building on top of the foundation that we've built in the original test, and building on top of that and continuing to build so that we continue to add shareholder value. Actionable metrics not only focus on the vanity metrics. I don't think vanity metrics will ever go away, but also to look at how we can get more specific, more granular, and focus on a specific goal where there's clear cause and effect relationship, and be able to measure that. And also look at just reporting as a whole. I think actionable, auditable, accessible, I think, is one of the areas that we tend not to focus on as much, but being able to make that information available to more and more people and accurate reporting. In summary, I hope that that hopefully makes it clear the difference between the Vanity and Actionable Metrics, and hopefully we can go forward and add real value to our businesses. So Ernie, back over to you.
Thank you very much, James, for your great content and insight. What we're going to do now is we're going to launch our first of 3 polling questions focused on the current state of the strategic level of the FP&A function at your companies. Just as a reminder, those of you after CPE credits for today's webinar will need to answer all 3 polling questions during the webinar. Of course, we appreciate everyone's consideration in answering our polling questions. Time permitting, we're going to review the results of the polling questions and get some comments from our speakers. And again, we encourage you to please ask questions today's topic via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We're going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 30 seconds or so. As we wind down the time allotted for our first polling question, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Richard Pacheco. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Richard Pacheco. Richard Pacheco, Vice President of Finance and Administration, AAA Southern New England. Richard has 13 years of senior management experience in public accounting, specializing in manufacturing, service industries, investment accounting, and retirement plan auditing. Richard has 7 years of executive experience with AAA, overseeing finance, treasury, accounting, financial and regulatory reporting, security, and building services for approximately 20 legal entities operating in 5 states. With that, it is my pleasure to hand the floor over to our next speaker, Richard. You have control. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, and also thank you to Profix and Proformative for inviting me to speak to everyone today. Building upon a little bit of what James spoke about, we're going to talk a little bit about our roadmap at AAA Southern New England that brought us to CPM and how to get some of those actionable metrics. So a little bit about Southern New England. Most people think of AAA as tow trucks around the roads, and we're actually a little more complicated than that. We have about 3.5 million members for our club. Most people don't realize that there are different clubs throughout the territory, and we are not one organization. We are separate legal entities. We are one of the largest throughout the United States, operating in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and have about 2,000 employees. So besides tow trucks, we also do mobile glass, we do battery services, we sell travel products, insurance products. On the consumer loan side, we have mortgages, auto loans, student lending, certificate of deposit, and other money market type items. We operate in regulated industries. As Ernie said, we have about 20 legal entities here at our club. So it creates many reporting challenges and metrics. In essence, we're running almost like a conglomerate where we're trying to analyze and slice and dice data from more than one industry. So that results in some reporting and budgeting challenges that we had when we go back about 4 years ago before we implemented a CPM solution. We were disseminating about 200 pages of results across multiple sites, various states, and we were doing it through paper formats or Excel spreadsheets. We'd send out things in draft, we'd try to get comments back, and then try to submit finals. And by the time we were done, the data was really old, and it really didn't allow us to analytically look at anything or really determine what did we need to do to make our business grow. We had concerns over security of financial data. As a service provider, our biggest expense is payroll, so we wanted to maintain security over that. We wanted to provide timely results, and we needed to do internal, external, regulatory, and other national reporting to AAA as a total to try to see how we were doing. We maintained Excel spreadsheets and various formulas to do our budgets that we did on an annual basis. And that included doing payroll. So we would take all our payroll data, do some pretty complex formulas, try to do merit increases, try to determine promotions, and make sure we were analyzing costs of doing business to our different business lines and hoping formulas didn't break at the end. Many times business owners would come back to us and say, well, gee, what happens if we did a different merit increase across the board? Well, we would try to make the spreadsheets as dynamic as possible, but obviously when you're dealing with spreadsheets, there's only so much you can do to get a timely result out there. The other challenge we had in the finance department was to make sure that we had the proper people, to make sure that they knew how to keep up with the Excel formulas and also maintain our report writer. Just maintaining new chart of accounts as new accounts would get added and making sure that it rolled through all the accounts and things balanced at the end. And at the end of the day, we were almost having a programmer who needed to work with us to make sure that we weren't losing anything, especially at the budget time. So when budgets would come back, we'd have a mini staff that would spend the entire weekend here at the club rolling up the numbers. And anybody, on the line that's in the finance function knows that dreaded weekend when all of the business lines put their budgets in and you're trying to roll everything up and it doesn't balance. So we had many inefficiencies, and this is what we knew about. The things that we didn't know about were, did people add lines? Did people subtract something? What control did we have over those spreadsheets? So we would try to solve for everything we knew about and hope that there were no other errors when things went out. So we developed a wish list, and we said, in a perfect world, what would we like to have for our monthly financial statement process, our budget process, and more importantly, coming up with metrics that we could make actionable decisions on. So we wanted to streamline, standardize, and increase the speed of the process from start to finish. We wanted to make sure people had access to the information that they need, that they could get on it when they wanted, and we wanted that end user experience to be seamless. One of my goals when I set out to this was not to come up with a system that I have to teach end users every time someone got hired into our club. They need to be good at running their business, not learning a system. To me, that was not their problem. That was my problem and my staff's problem, to have a financial system that worked, that was very familiar to them. So we took the work on in finance. We wanted to maintain control, however, so we wanted to make sure that individuals had access to numbers, access to metrics, could make decisions, but we still maintained control over the data. We had learned the hard way through Excel spreadsheets and programming knowledge of doing monthly financial reporting that we didn't want something that was high maintenance. We wanted something that was seamless. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want something that was custom. We really wanted to go out and find something that could be customized to us without being custom programmed. So somewhere we could click boxes or make selections and act on the fly to get what we needed that was easy to maintain. And most importantly, we wanted what-if ability. We didn't want to be reporting the history all the time. We wanted to affect the future and figure out what it is that we could do. So what was our roadmap? Well, at AAA, we don't talk about GPSs. We talk about triptychs. So we set out a roadmap, and we said, look, we can either have failure here or we can have success. So we looked at the functionality within the existing systems that we already employed and said, could we push those any further to the limit? We looked at other competing products similar to what our existing systems were, and we started searching on the web because we couldn't find anything within our own systems or our competitors that said this is going to work for us. And where we fell upon was a CPM solution. We realized that that was going to be what was going to lead us to the path of success and get us exactly what we wanted. Once we figured out that we needed a CPM solution, we started looking at what was the customer support of the competitors out there? How easy was it to use? What was the annual, monthly, weekly, daily maintenance? Could we slice and dice data? And we very quickly learned the benefit of a cube. And that was something, we actually went with Profix and Profix introduced us to a cube. And the way that I'll explain a cube is if you think of a traditional Excel spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet will have your X and your Y axis, and anything you want to plot, you can do that. And if you want to slice and dice it a little bit differently, well, you end up creating yet another spreadsheet. A cube is a multi-dimension that basically, if you think of a general ledger string, you may have 3 segments to that string. And if you want to report on any of those, you can simply add the combinations of maybe a natural account, a department, and a location. Well, in a typical general ledger, if you decide you want to add a new account number and it's an existing natural, department, and location, you generally have to key in a new account number, even though you're not creating anything new. With a cube, the cube basically says, I already know that natural account, I already know that department, and I already know that location. So I can add that together, and you don't manually have to add it. So when we looked at CPM solutions, we quickly realized that in order to mine the data and come up with metrics, we wanted to be able to slice and dice that data and simply drag and drop rows and columns of information to recompute automatically a huge set of data and come back with the results. And that's what the cube allows us to do. So it was multi-dimensional versus an X and Y axis. So we launched Profix in 2009, and we did it for financial reporting and for budgeting. What did we end up with? We've gone completely paperless for our financial reporting. We now push out a link or a PDF of a report, depending on our end user preference. It comes out as soon as we're done closing and analyzing. Our results are a lot more accurate. The distribution is a lot more timely. And one of the things that I will tell you that we did is, although we could have cut days out of the system, we decided to keep half of it in finance. So what we did is we get the data out to our users quicker than we did before, but we kept some of that time to actually analyze. Before, we were so happy to be done, and it was so late when we got out data that I'm almost embarrassed to say sometimes the numbers would go out without a very detailed review. It was more a cursory review. Now we spend the time and we can look at things, look at metrics, determine, does this make sense from an analytical standpoint. Much more accurate. We've come up with a workflow mechanism now where we can push things out, gain answers to budget questions. On a monthly basis, we can determine if things are temporary or permanent. We have a complete mechanism for getting that information where before it was picking up phones, sending emails, and you have no control. Now we have a pie chart that tells us exactly where we are. It's a lot more secure than it was before because we can set up templates and based upon security, determine everyone's template may look the same. However, if you oversee our automotive services section, you can only see the data related to automotive services. The person who runs our financial services will see that. So it allows us to create items once, push them out, and through security that is set up once or upon a change of role, maintains all of that. Much more security over all of our payroll data, so only individuals have access to their own data and any of their direct or indirect reports. It's been a tremendous time saver for us. Much more stable environment. We don't have Excel spreadsheets out there. We have reporting consistency. Our end users feel like they're working in Excel. They didn't have to learn anything new. We don't worry about bad links. Our users can access the system whenever they want, and the data is fresh. We're not waiting to close the month or load some data in there. It's up to date. And we have instant standalone reporting and consolidation. So gone are the days of spending an entire weekend rolling up numbers. In essence, when our budget is submitted, the last person to submit, a minute later, I literally have a completely rolled up budget, and same thing with a consolidated financial statement with eliminations and everything else that I need. So we literally went from rolling up our sleeves and working all weekend to the push of a button. Again, allowing us more time to analyze data and figure out what it is we can do with it. Beyond gathering data, we got some additional benefits, and these were huge to us. We're agile. We can analyze versus compile. I've said that many times, and it's true. We now say what is happening versus what has happened. Before, we were very reactionary. Now we can dig into numbers. We can analyze more. We can do what-if scenarios. We can do more projections. We can do ROIs. We've rolled out beyond the traditional financial reporting. We now obtain metrics, either from other systems that we integrated in, or just simply asking folks to key in data. And then we write on our financial statements are reporting ratios now. Things that you couldn't do before because, unlike a gross profit percentage, maybe you're doing, average commission per FTE, where we might put in, FTE count, or number of cars towed, so on and so forth. So by getting a few other statistical items, we can now report ratios, which allows us to very quickly get through seasonality of businesses, compare us to other competitors, and really, again, start doing more analysis. We've rolled out additional cubes to do more than just financial information. And we can now hold people accountable because we can a lot quicker determine what some of the root causes are. If we look back at James' slide there, you can have a vanity metric that just shows things are going up, things are going up. Well, maybe the club overall is doing well, but if we start looking at individual regions or business lines, we can very quickly start asking the questions to the right people to ensure we're doing a much better job. So it allows us to really do it. One thing I would say is if you're in a cube CPM environment, if you can dream it, you really can build it in some way, shape, or form. Because once your data is in there, no longer are you trying to get the data out. Now all you're doing is analyzing and determining how can you affect the data that's going to go in the future. So that's really the roadmap that AAA Southern New England took. And from some of what we did, my last slide here is really some tips and tricks that we learned along the way. And the first and foremost, I said it here, plan, plan, plan. If you figure out up front what the end game is, think of your end reporting, what it is that your end users want, what is it that you want, you really can work backwards and determine how to build your system. Because once you have it built, collecting the data and analyzing it is the easy part. It's really setting up the structure and determining what you want. So you really need to work backwards. And ask, do you want to do exactly what it is you do today and just make it easier, or do you really want to expand beyond that? And that's what we did. We sat down and said, no, in a perfect world, we'd love to have these data elements, and we worked back. Make it scalable. You're always growing. You're always adding new business lines. We've merged with clubs over the year. So we really looked at a design that worked for us not just today, but something that's going to work for us as we continue to grow and as new businesses come into the fold. We automated as many feeds as we could so that we weren't doing manual data entry. Manual data entry is expensive, it's time-consuming, and it's inaccurate. So we automated as many items as we possibly could. The other thing I would caution you is limit accessibility of your report design. Keep it to a few who really know your CPM system well. Make them be the gatekeeper so that you have consistency and compliance with everything that you've worked so hard to set up. And lastly, working at AAA, I had to throw a palm tree picture in there. Honestly, with the time that you save, you really can work a lot smarter versus harder. So that's really where we've been with CPM, and it's been a tremendous road over the last few years. We continue to tweak it. We continue to expand on it. And I can honestly say I can't believe we didn't do it years ago, because it's just night and day from where we were before in terms of metrics and what we can analyze. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ernie.
Oh, thank you very much, Richard, for your great content and insights. Now we're going to go ahead and launch our second polling question, which is focused on the technology currently being used at your companies to help manage the FP&A function. As a reminder, those of you after CPE credits for today's webinar, we need to answer this polling question and the remaining polling question. And again, we appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all the polling questions. Again, time permitting, we'll review the results and comments with the speakers during the Q&A session, and we encourage you to keep asking questions in the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. So we're going to go ahead and leave this up another 30 seconds or so. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the Q&A session so we take advantage of the tremendous opportunity to tap the knowledge of the speakers that we have today. So I'm going to go ahead and give our first question to Richard. Could you comment on what was the biggest unexpected benefit to your company and your team since you've implemented the CPM solution?
For us, it was the time and the accuracy. We thought we were going to just automate a process and make our lives easier, but we didn't realize how much more detailed analysis it was going to provide. So for us, I would say that the biggest benefit was analyzing data and finding things that were inaccurate or needed to be modified before we sent it out to our business line. So added benefit was not just time saving and headcount changes, but much more accurate information.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and give this about 5 more seconds, so please go ahead and vote. We appreciate your consideration. After I close this poll, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up the results of our first poll regarding the status of the strategic value of the FP&A function at the attendees companies, which I think gave us some pretty interesting results. So I'm going to go ahead and share with everyone the results here, and then I would like to ask James to comment on those results, and if this is in line with what you're seeing, or is this surprising to you at all?
Yeah, I think it's a very mixed result. I think the good news is that 19% of the participants put direct involvement with strategy within the company. I think that's a great step forward. I think I think this is the evolution of FP&A. We are seeing that FP&A, especially as we saw that graph with the uncertainty, especially after the 2008, uncertainty, high levels of uncertainty are continuing. FP&A is becoming a more and more critical part of the business, and being able to help drive awareness both in risks, but also help to drive business and help to drive decision making. So I think there's still, there's an opportunity for those that don't have an FP&A team to have a look at it. But especially covering the work that covering the other presentations, there's opportunities to streamline a lot of those processes, so that pulling those FP&A teams out of the just the day-to-day analytics and getting them to become more strategic is a great opportunity, or a great win, and could help to drive a lot of companies forward.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Richard, it sounds like you've had a great journey, but could you please share with us what was your biggest hurdle, you would say, in implementing the CPM solution?
Yeah, I think it was what led me to my first tip there, which was the end game. The last slide shows it there. As you move through that process, you end up creating much more strategic initiatives, much more involvement with the executive teams around your organization. And I think when we went into it, we didn't realize how powerful that was going to be, and we actually had to sort of redo our setup in our CPM system a couple of years in. So I think our biggest hurdle was not knowing the end game. So that's why I caution folks to think about, where do you think you're going to be? How useful is this data going to be? And as you present it outside of the finance function, what are people going to do with it, and what more are they going to ask you for? So a week doesn't go by that someone says, can you build me a report? Can you calculate this metric? Can you give me this data? It's almost scary once you start giving people data, how much more data they want. So I would say the biggest hurdle for us was not knowing what that end game was going to be. You say you only know what you know, you don't know what you don't know, and you're never going to be able to answer that, and you got to put your toe in the water. But I would say the biggest hurdle is trying to think outside the box, figure out what it is you're going to need, and build it that way so you have more of that available for your end users.
Okay, great. Thank you. James, we have a question about actionable metrics and vanity metrics. Could you comment as to whether you think actionable metrics should actually replace vanity metrics, or is there value in the vanity metrics on some levels still?
Yeah, I think the thing with actionable metrics is they tend to be very specific to a goal. So, it doesn't tell you a lot about everything else. It tells you exactly how well you're doing with that specific goal. So I think there will always be a place for vanity metrics that give you a view of the big picture. We saw in the example that I gave you that the vanity metric was more about tracking the market share on a weekly basis. Now that is a critical element to be able to understand as a business exactly where you're heading and what's doing it. But I think the opportunity is to get a lot more actionable in a lot more of the metrics, so that you are actually driving that business and you're driving that shareholder value. You're not just looking at it on a high level, but you're actually getting into the detail. So to answer the question, I think there's a place for both of those metrics. But I think as long as people understand the advantages and disadvantages of each of the types of metrics and which category they fall into, I think that also helps the users to be able to make better informed decisions.
Great. Let me ask you kind of a follow-up question on that. Could you give us some insights on, how you really look at developing the cause and effect and when you're looking at those actionable metrics?
So looking at the cause, what normally the way that I go about a scenario like this is often starting from the strategic intent of the company. What is it, or even of the department? And I use a process called the Hoshin model, which starts off with what is your strategic intent and works basically piece by piece down there. What are the pillars that make up that strategic intent? And then eventually you get down to each of the elements that you want to measure your business on. And then once you've had those, once you've identified what are the key metrics and what are the areas that you want to develop your business on, it's then really looking down and seeing how can I build those metrics in a way that it details what is, if I do an action, how can I measure the effect of that action, and detailing it in that granular level. Now, the thing with actionable metrics is that an actionable metric may be an actionable metric in one business and might be a vanity metric in another business. So every business is different, and you have to look at it more holistically. You have to look at what your strategy is, but also trying to, making sure that you get to a granular level where you're actually, if I take this action, does this metric, is it able to measure what the outcome of the action, whether positive or negative, of that action? I hope that answered your question.
Yes. Thank you very much. A few questions here. Can you tell me how long your implementation took, and then also what is the GL system you're using right now?
Sure. So from design to implementation was approximately 4 months, and we could have done a little quicker. We actually slowed it down a little bit in terms of the complexity, because we decided to do budget and our financial reporting sort of all at the same time versus kind of, I think most companies will do one or the other. We did both. So for us, it was about that time frame. At the time, we were using a different general ledger system. We're currently on Great Plains on 2013. So we actually have lived through converting that from our original general ledger to the one we use today. And that process was actually quite easy, switching from one GL to the next. One of the things I love about our CPM system is it really is plug and play. So the general ledger solely gathers the data, but once we put it into our solution, it's really our solution that we use for reporting and analysis and making our business decisions. So to me, any general ledger could feed into it. It's the power of using the CPM solution where we built it that way from day one. Again, thinking of the end game, saying we'll probably change general ledgers as time change, but we don't want to change where we're truly making our core decisions. I think most general ledger packages have a very good, they're either good in inventory or AP or AR or whatever, but we looked for a package that was great in financial statement, report generation, workflow, and kind of all the things we were looking for versus trying to build all that into a general ledger.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and launch the final polling question as we navigate through the Q&A session. Again, those after CPE credits need to answer the polling question. We appreciate everyone else's consideration in answering the question. Another question for you, Richard. How did you go about assessing the customer service level at the various companies you were looking at during your CPM solution selection process?
Yeah, we did a few things. We called into customer support, even though we were not, currently licensed with a few of them, but just to see how that initial call was. Did they answer timely? Were they available on nights and weekends? And just, once they answered, asked kind of a dumb question that would give us a feel. Obviously, we called some of the referrals, and most customers are not going to, give you a bad story. Otherwise, they wouldn't be referrals. But a big thing of what we did is was a Google search. I mean, it's amazing what you can do online now, and just put in, customer support, and you'll read some great stories, and you'll read some horror stories. So that was another approach we took. And then we went to the company's websites, saw some of the customers that use their solution, and we reached out, just asked for somebody in their accounting department, and some would speak to us and some wouldn't. But we actually just reached out and said, hey, how do you find your customer support? We're thinking about signing on, and heard stories that way, both good and bad. So we used a combination of those 3 or 4 techniques to give us a good gauge of kind of end user experience.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and take one final question before we make some closing comments. James, someone's saying they've decided on a few metrics they believe might be valuable for their company, but don't have the data available. Do you have any words of wisdom you might be able to offer them?
Yeah, I think data availability is always a challenge. Finding the perfect data is often, you've decided on the metric, and it's often sometimes difficult to find that perfect data. Sometimes the options are to have a look and see if there's another metric that would support your overall goal, and seeing if the data is available on that. The alternative is to look and see what is available online. It's amazing what you can find online, either through customer portals. A lot of the big retailers now are offering a lot of data, and sometimes if you pay a small subscription fee, you get even more data. So there's often a lot of data out there available to you. But sometimes it's just a matter of being, going onto the internet. One of our clients wanted to sold products online, and really wanted to kind of understand what the impact was of their marketing programs and their actions. And what we ended up doing is just taking the positions that their products were in the top selling list, and being able to identify a metric behind that. So there's always opportunities out there to have a look at and see if you can find that data.
Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to close the Q&A session. We'd like to thank James and Richard for their time and insight. They're clearly thought leaders in their fields and an excellent source of information on today's topics. Note that in the post-webinar survey, you'll have the opportunity to express your interest in being connected with either or both speakers with just 1 or 2 mouse clicks. As a reminder, you'll be asked to take a short survey once the webinar concludes. We greatly appreciate your feedback. We invite you to please join us at Proformative.com to ask any questions you may have and to continue the conversation with your peers. Again, we'd like to remind you of the audience about Proformative's 2nd Annual CFO Dimensions Conference being held August 21st and 22nd in New York City. This is going to be a great event with world-class speakers focused on strategic leadership and finance. You can learn more about CFO Dimensions at www.cfodimension.com. We'd like to thank today's sponsor, Profix, and I'd like to thank the audience today for their valuable time. Thank you very much.